Okay, before we get into anything else tonight, I need you to sit with one number for a second. 7.28 million acres have already burned in this country, and we're not even done with August. That's 168% of what we'd normally see over a 10-year stretch, and fire season isn't close to over. The whole nation just got bumped to Preparedness Level 5, the highest tier that exists, with 76 large fires actively burning as we speak. And there's one fire tonight that genuinely stopped me in my tracks when I read the numbers. Up in Tok, Alaska, a blaze went from half an acre to over 5,000 acres in a single day. 20 structures gone, a disaster declaration from the governor, and some of the firefighters battling it lost their own homes in the process. At the same time, the Pacific Northwest is sitting at its own maximum preparedness level, with 34 large fires still uncontained tonight. There's a weather setup driving all of this that we absolutely need to break down because it stretches from Alaska all the way down to Texas, and there's a tense few days coming up in the Northwest specifically. So let's work through every region tonight, starting down south and moving our way north. We'll begin in New Mexico, where the situation in the Santa Fe National Forest has fire managers genuinely nervous. A blaze burning about 3 miles east of Cañada has already cleared more than 11,000 acres, but honestly, the size isn't even the scariest part. It's how the fire is behaving. Reports describe crowning, meaning the flames are jumping up into the tree canopy and racing across the tops instead of staying on the ground, plus long-range spotting, where wind carries burning embers well ahead of the fire line and starts brand new ignitions somewhere else entirely. Right now, this fire sits at just 9% containment. Evacuations are active, and nearly 700 firefighters are assigned to it, with CAL FIRE's Team 8 running the operation. Suppression costs have already crossed $9.7 million, and with no real rain in the forecast for that part of the country, this one isn't wrapping up anytime soon. From there, let's head over to Texas because the entire state is in a rough spot right now. Drought conditions are gripping Texas from border to border, and crews are being pulled into medical support roles to back up fire operations happening statewide. Temperatures are climbing into the upper 90s and even past 100 in places, while humidity is dropping into the teens. Put those together with dry ground and any wind at all, and you basically have a recipe for instant ignition. So if you're out there mowing your lawn, running equipment, or thinking about a campfire right now, please just don't. One spark under these conditions can spiral out of control faster than you'd believe. And actually, there's a perfect example of exactly that near Lake Arrowhead, Texas. A grass fire broke out there Tuesday evening around 7:40, pulling in volunteer crews from several nearby departments. Here's a detail that tells you everything about how brutal the heat was that night. While crews worked one edge of the fire, the rubber hose on one of the brush trucks actually melted straight through from the heat. Not damaged, melted. That fire ultimately burned about 145 acres before crews managed to box it into a cleared pasture, and strike teams are still out there right now cutting fire breaks to lock down the perimeter. Now let's jump up into Oregon, specifically the Columbia River Gorge, because Tuesday was an absolute whirlwind there. Under an active red flag warning, local fire crews responded to 4 completely separate fire calls in under 2 hours. First, a brush fire tied to an encampment along the river, then a vehicle fire that spread into roadside vegetation, then another brush fire on Forest Service land, and finally a fast-moving brush fire that came within striking distance of 6 homes. Firefighters managed to hold that last one and save every structure. And here's the twist. Investigators believe it started when someone was mowing their lawn specifically to create a defensive fire break around their property. Under those red flag conditions, even the friction from a mower blade against dry grass can be enough to spark a fire. Add in gusts up to 40 miles an hour funneling through the gorge like a wind tunnel, and you understand why this corridor is considered one of the most fire-dangerous stretches in the entire Northwest. Moving further north into Washington state, we hit what's probably the single biggest fire story out of this whole region. Northwest of Leavenworth in Chelan County, a fire has now torched nearly 136,000 acres of national forest since it ignited back in mid-July. 26 structures have already been lost, and suppression spending has climbed past $62 million. Here's what's wild, though. Despite being over a month old, this fire only just hit 10% containment, and fire officials are actually calling that a real milestone given how stubborn the fire behavior has been, including whole clusters of trees igniting simultaneously in what's called group torching. Nearly 2,000 personnel are assigned under a complex incident command team. Evacuations remain active across the county, and there's a Red Cross shelter set up locally for anyone displaced. That's not the only fire keeping Washington busy either. Near Snoqualmie Pass, another blaze has burned over 3,600 acres and sits at just 2% contained. Near Tenasket, a much larger fire has scorched more than 153,000 acres, but is actually 44% contained, which counts as good news, relatively speaking. Back down in Oregon, the Mount Hood National Forest has its own major incident that's burned over 90,000 acres and is roughly halfway contained, with suppression costs north of $65 million. And near Sprague River, Oregon, another fire sitting at nearly 54,000 acres just crossed the halfway containment mark, too. A task force crew actually just wrapped up 5 straight days working that fire, clearing brush, chasing down spot fires, and supporting a controlled burn to reduce fuel. Now, because of new lightning threats, that same crew has already been redeployed to Baker City to stand by for whatever ignites next. That's basically the reality for these crews right now. Go wherever the lightning strikes. There's also a genuinely interesting development worth mentioning here. For the first time ever, the country's Wildland Fire Service has a large, purpose-built drone aircraft actively deployed, currently under a 90-day contract, and it already helps support operations on the Sprague River fire. This thing doesn't drop water or retardant. Its whole job is gathering intelligence, infrared scanning, real-time mapping, giving commanders a live picture of how a fire is shifting minute to minute. Officials have been clear that it's meant to work alongside firefighters and aircraft, not replace them, but it's still a major shift in how these fires are being tracked. Now back to Alaska, because this is honestly the most alarming individual fire in tonight's roundup. Near the town of Tok, a fire that started when high winds pushed a tree into power lines has turned into what analysts are calling a catastrophic explosive growth event. It went from around 20 acres to over 1,000 in just hours, and by Tuesday evening, satellite tracking had it above 5,000 acres and still climbing. Locals reported hearing propane tanks detonating as the flames moved through the community. Level 3 evacuations, meaning leave immediately, are in effect north of the highway, covering a wide residential zone. Close to 200 firefighters are on scene, backed by air tankers, water-scooping planes, and helicopters. And the most dangerous edge of the fire tonight is throwing embers up to half a mile ahead of itself. Crews are cutting containment lines through dense spruce forest, and the fire has already crossed one major road, now pushing toward the river. Interestingly, an old burn scar from a 1990 fire is actually helping slow things down on one flank, since there's simply less fuel left to burn there. As of the latest update, containment sits around 16%, with the town itself mostly secured. And here's the line that worries me the most. Forecasters are saying there's no meaningful rain expected for that area anytime soon. Quick stop in Washington before we move to the bigger weather picture. Near Packwood, crews have actually gotten a full containment line around a smaller fire's perimeter, but there's still hidden heat burning in terrain too steep and rocky to safely access on foot. Aircraft drops aren't fully penetrating because the tree canopy up there runs nearly 200 feet tall. So crews are focused on clearing brush along roads near town to create backup containment lines just in case the fire flares again. Okay, let's talk about the weather system behind literally everything we just covered, because this is the real story. A massive dome of high pressure is currently parked over the western half of the country, and it's doing exactly what these ridges always do, blocking clouds, trapping heat, and drying everything out even further. Forecasters expect that ridge to keep expanding across the interior west in the coming days, specifically in the inland northwest. Expect warm, dry conditions right through the end of the week, with highs pushing into the high 80s and low 90s, and humidity in mountain passes and river basins dropping into the teens during the afternoon, which is exactly the threshold where fire behavior gets dangerous. Meanwhile, way over on the other side of the country, a cold front is dropping down through the northern plains, bringing heavy rain and thunderstorms from the upper Midwest into the lower Missouri Valley, with a slight risk of severe weather stretching from northeast Kansas into Missouri. That'll cool things down for the northern tier through midweek, but there's a catch. Storms like that bring lightning, and lightning means new fire starts. We already saw this play out once this season when a single prolonged lightning event sparked 17 separate large fires across the Northwest in one shot. Meanwhile, farther south, the heat is not backing off at all. Oklahoma has seen several new fires pop up. The southern region logged 73 brand new fire starts in a single day recently, and Florida currently has an active large fire that's already burned around 4,000 acres. Looking a few days out, there's a system expected to reach the Pacific Northwest this weekend, and officials are describing it as weak and notably dry, bringing gusty winds and thunder risk rather than any real cooling rain. I want to be straight with you about the uncertainty here because forecasters themselves are flagging it. This system could go one of two ways. Best case, it arrives roughly as expected. Temperatures ease slightly, winds stay moderate, and crews on the region's biggest fires get a real window to push containment numbers up. Worst case, the front generates strong, erratic outflow winds ahead of any cooling, which is one of the most dangerous situations a fire crew can face on an active line. The National Weather Service office covering that region has specifically called out the rising fire concern tied to this weekend's setup. So this isn't speculations coming straight from official forecasters. And for Alaska specifically, the outlook is genuinely uneven. Most of the state is expected to trend cooler and wetter in the coming days, except for the Tanana Valley, which includes Tok and that explosive fire we just talked about. No meaningful rain is currently forecast there, and that's arguably the most concerning single detail in the entire national fire weather outlook right now. Zooming out even further, the broader seasonal outlook shows above normal fire potential continuing at least through September across Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, California, and the Southern Plains. So here's where things stand as we close out tonight. 76 large fires burning nationwide, the country at its highest preparedness level, and the Northwest remaining the epicenter with 34 fires still uncontained across Oregon and Washington. The fire near Tok, Alaska is the most urgent situation on the board right now, with active evacuations and no rain in sight. The New Mexico fire remains the most volatile in terms of pure fire behavior. The southern half of the country logged dozens of new fire starts in a single day this week. And that weekend system in the Northwest is one we'll be watching extremely closely because it could genuinely swing either direction. We'll be tracking every one of these situations daily as new information comes in. So if this kind of coverage is useful to you, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn notifications on so you don't miss the next update. And to every single firefighter out on a line tonight, all 29,000 plus of you across this country, thank you. You're the reason so many homes are still standing. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you tomorrow with the latest.